Welcome to the Internet Advisor Podcast, recorded every week at the studios of historic WJR Radio in Detroit.
Your hosts, Foster Brown, Gary Baker, and Ed Rudell.
Guys, I have to say that I was kind of shocked when I found out about the story that our two guests are going to be speaking to us about. The title of the documentary they're working on is called Bad Water, Small Town, Big Lies. And with just that, I want to introduce to you a couple of people who were involved in creating that documentary. And they are none other than Victor Pitko. Victor, welcome to the Internet Advisor.
Thank you, and glad to be here.
And Ed Gardner. Ed, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
Thank you both for being with us. And guys, let's, if we can, kind of catch our audience's attention here with a story that began with a conversation, Victor, I understand, that you had with your niece at a little town in upstate New York.
Yes. There is a small village located between Bennington, Vermont, and Troy, New York, which is close to Albany, New York. They're on the east side of New York State, about 180 miles north of New York City. A little hamlet called Hoosick Falls happens to be the nearby village of Cambridge, which was the home of Grandma Moses, famous artist from 1960s.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's about what it was known for. Now it's being known for poisoning of drinking water, primarily through a chemical that was used to manufacture Teflon, that ubiquitous product that what works wonders for keeping, for food.
Sure.
Yeah, for cooking.
Sure.
Non-stick cooking.
Yeah, chefs everywhere love it. You don't have it burning the bottom of your pan.
Well, it's a military-grade coating for the missiles, if I remember correctly.
Yep. There's plenty of uses for it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, huge.
And you know the expression about when somebody is slippery and avoids the truth, they're called Teflon coated.
Yeah, and in this particular case, the truth about Teflon is pretty terrible. What did she find out about her family that kind of, I imagine that was a shock value for you?
Well, there was another gentleman in Hoosick Falls by the name of Mike Hickey, whose dad died of cancer. He was employed by the company that made the Teflon product for plumber's tape. It was a sealant that was used on threads.
Yeah.
Very popular.
Oh, yeah, right.
He died of cancer at an early age, and when Mike started investigating, he found that there were a number of deaths that seemingly were concentrated in a small area. And he asked a local physician to look into the deaths and see if there was a common cause, and the jointly discovered that, it was pointing fingers at the plant that made the Teflon. So once they started looking at it and started taking some tests and encouraging regulators to look at the situation, they found that it was highly contaminated with a chemical, a family of chemicals called PFAS, short form of it's called PFAS. And there's like 15 or more chemicals within this family that are all related, and they're unregulated. The government doesn't have control on them. They asked the manufacturer to cease and desist a number of years ago, which they did voluntarily, but the problem is that the chemical bioaccumulates in the body. In other words, once it's in there, it doesn't leave the body, and it
almost
continues to build up.
It almost sounds like, is it mercury that does that too? It builds up in the tissues?
I'm not a chemist. I can't tell you that.
Yeah, I know. But there are some of those chemicals.
The half-life is extremely long, so it stays in the body. And then it's in the air.
Yeah.
It's in the groundwater now. Hoosick Falls had the prestige of being an area that had the cleanest water in New York State, the best tasting water in New York State.
Ooh.
And now all the wells are contaminated.
Oh.
And they've been bringing in bottled water for a substitute, and they're looking for new sources. One of the big problems is they can't find it. It's very difficult to find areas that are clean because the way
because it's gotten into the
water
watershed. It's probably gotten into the watershed. We're talking about Victor Pitko, who is in this case right now, an independent filmmaker, and he and Ed Gardner, his partner, you've got a campaign going, a GoFundMe campaign going to help to fund this. You already, I understand, you've done a lot of shooting, right? A lot of, because you came to the state of Michigan, and Ed, as I understand it, up north near Wurtsmith Air Force Base, which is no longer occupied up there, you found a source of that same chemical.
Yeah, and it's not just that place. I mean, Michigan right now has more identified sites than any other state in the country.
No. Wow. Is that simply because we have identified them? We've gone out and looked for them?
Partially it's because of our industrial history. This is a chemical that's used in a lot of industrial processes, and it's been used since the 40s. I mean, the Scoto-Wurtsmith site is primarily because of the Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
It's a key element to firefighting foam. It's what makes the foam blanket the fire.
I got
It's
you.
what keeps the foam.
Yeah.
And up there, there's a little lake next to that base that it's got foam on it every time the wind kicks up and it's choppy.
Yeah. I got it.
And all these people have cabins on that lake, and they're freaking out about the lake being covered with foam.
All right, Ed and Victor, hang on a second. We're going to take a quick break for some messages, and we'll be right back. And then let's get into talking about the trajectory of your story, where it's going, and the impact that it's having.
Okay.
In just a minute, we'll be returning with that story on the Internet Advisor.
Now back to the Internet Advisor. Once again, your hosts, Foster Brown, Gary Baker, and Ed Rudell.
Our two guests here today, Victor Pitko and Ed Gardner, are talking about something that affects probably all of us, I think it's safe to say, guys, and that is this chemical called PFAS that's in our drinking water. Let me step back and ask that question. Is it true that, let's say, the majority of the people listening to this program, it's in our drinking water, regardless of where we live?
That's probably true. The exposure is coming from the air, it's coming from groundwater, and it's coming from the food we eat.
Wow. Now, tell me.
Well, I have a question.
Yes, yeah.
Because I have a 60-foot straw that goes into the water that I suck water out of.
Yeah.
So, and every 5 years or so, I send it in the state of Michigan to get a water analysis. They tell me how much arsenic is in there and if any type of contaminations or if there's pesticides. And now every year it comes back clean. But would you know if the state of Michigan or the states, if this chemical is a standard test?
It's becoming more likely that they'll test for it. In the past, it's not been tested for.
Yeah, because the reason why I'm asking is Nestle is now allowed to double their output of how much water they can suck out of Michigan's aquifer in the central Michigan, and I'll bet you they're testing it.
We would hope so.
Yeah.
The big issue is that it's unregulated, so there are no standards other than what the EPA has said, and the EPA has put it at 70 parts per trillion, which, according to researchers, is way, way too high. New Jersey has a limit of somewhere around 7 parts per trillion, but scientists say that 0 level is the only safe level because, again, it bioaccumulates. Once it's in the body, it doesn't leave, and you keep adding to it and keep adding to it.
Wow.
Now, those people who have been exposed to it, if they're drinking bottled water now as a substitute for the polluted water, that doesn't change the fact that they've been exposed and their health is at risk.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said that you had a GoFundMe website, and is that for the documentary that you're creating?
That's correct.
Now, what is that GoFundMe?
The GoFundMe URL is www.gofundme, one word, GoFundMe.com Bad Water Part 2. All squeezed together. Bad Water Part 2.
And by the way, I should say, folks, we will have this in the show notes for the program, so don't worry that you're missing this if you're driving someplace and you don't want you swerving off the road.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The issue for us is in creating this documentary is not just going after or pointing fingers at the polluters. It's helping those residents of small communities, which make up the bulk of the small water public sources. Communities under 10,000 don't have a voice in government because of the way the EPA and the way the regulators have set up their antenna. They don't consider populations of 10,000 important enough to warrant their attention. So all those small communities that have public wells that are polluted, they don't have any recourse. So what's happened in Hoosick Falls, what's happened in Rockford, Michigan, where there was a Wolverine Worldwide plant that was using Scotchgard to waterproof hush puppy shoes and other leather goods. They were virtually dumping the product onto the ground and improperly disposing of it such that it contaminated the water. When Ed was speaking about the largest concentrations of the chemical in the ground, that's basically the area that we're talking about. So small communities like Rockford are under 10,000. They don't have a voice. So the idea of the documentary is to give those communities that are just coming on board the wherewithal to learn how to become educated on the chemical, on the chemistry, being able to talk to legislators and regulators who largely are ignorant of the fact that this chemical exists, and getting them on their side, showing the evidence and the proof of the dangers of this chemical, and then getting some action taken in regards to remediation or medical help.
Extremely important. I think, Cal, you had a question? Cassie.
Yeah, from the standpoint of remediation, how extensive is that, and what's the resistance from the companies? Because I would imagine it's not a inexpensive process in order to remediate those sites.
Yeah.
Ed, want to answer that?
Part of the issue is, the immediate issue is to filter the water so that people aren't drinking bad water any longer, right? So, if it's a municipal system, they can put in filters that will filter it out, and that's expensive, but it's doable. And then you have but the problem is most of these towns are small towns where a lot of the people are on wells.
Yes.
And they're not on the municipal system. So, like in Hoosick Falls, what they did was they provided each of those homes with a water filter. And it was, a pretty heavy-duty water filter. It wasn't like the kind you buy from an Amway distributor and put on your faucet. And, so that was costly. And then one of the things they're dealing with in Oscoda is that the municipal area wants to, and this is happening in Rockford too, they want to extend the municipal system to the people who are on wells so that they're on a better system. Because if you got a home filter, at some point you got to change the filter in that thing.
Sure.
And it's toxic. It has to go to a toxic waste dump. You can't just throw it in the garbage.
That's true. It just you don't want to repeat the cycle.
Throw it in the backyard.
Oh, dear God, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and the half-life in the environment is like thousands and thousands of years. So it's not going away, and the filter's not going to go away. So, and the companies, like in Hoosick, the company paid for the filters. They paid for the municipal system to be upgraded. They just paid right out. And
I would imagine
that doesn't clean it up in the groundwater. That just, filters it before you drink it.
Ed, do you think that was they did that because it was small enough that they could handle it? But remediation in a bigger city would be a real feat. We don't have. Go ahead.
That's what's happening in Rockford, because Rockford is basically a suburb of Grand Rapids. And there they don't want to pay. It's going to be like $24 million to extend the municipal water system, and they don't want to pay for that.
Yep, that is it. So, guys, as you look at the task, I can imagine that as documentarians, you get all this information together, it could be kind of crushing to gather all of this and not to be able to put it into some place where it really gets respected and dealt with.
Right. So one of the issues we face is that every day something new happens. There's a new development. There's legislation that is being considered in some cases in New York State, for instance, because of Hoosick Falls and the awareness raising that they did. The governor finally signed a bill for $2.5 billion worth of water improvements, but not just for PFAS, but also for municipal systems that had old and crumbling water pipes.
Yes, of course.
So it's just a water improvement bill, and that's a remarkable step forward. Also, the naming of the polluted area Superfund site so that they can get some federal money.
Yeah,
So-
and probably the most famous of all toxic waste. If you draw a straight line across the state of New York, you reach Love Canal, and that
you
was very
do.
famous
That's
in
right.
the 60s, 70s, and
Yeah.
Well, guys,
Yeah.
we're running out of time here. So I guess the biggest thing is to tell people that if they feel strongly about this and want to help you get your message out, again, to go to the GoFundMe site, and we'll put that whole URL up there and give you a link that you can see the program and you can get involved and help the guys. Thank you so much, Victor Pitko and Ed Gardner, for caring and for getting out a limb there and trying to make this thing happen. Please keep in touch with us. We want to know how things go, all right?
We will.
We will
Thank
do
you so
that.
much for having us.
Thank you so much. And we'll be back in just a minute.